Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm checking out the RacerCube. This is a all-in-one solution for your quadcopter. We have got a SP Racing F3 Evo flight controller, and it's also got a built-in on-screen display. And then we have got a 20 amp ESC board, so this is all in one here. And then we have also got a FreeSky receiver, a S-Bus receiver in D8 mode, and we have a buzzer here which can be used as a lost model alarm and also for your voltage telemetry. And then we also have got a micro SD card in here as well for storing black box, and this is a 1 GB card. Now, I don't know about you, but any website that I go on that has those Google adverts is always trying to get me to buy one of these, so I thought I would get one to check out. So the idea is that we're going to have a very lightweight setup here, and it can be used from, say, a 130 size model up to a 250 size model, or bigger, I suppose, if you want to do that. Now, it's not completely all-in-one, in my opinion, because it does not have a VTX. You can see that we have these cables coming out here, and this is for your camera, and this is for your VTX. So this outputs 5 volts here, so you're going to have a camera that runs off 5 volts, and the same for a VTX as well. You know, the idea is, of course, that all this stacks up on top of each other, and you're given some standoffs here in a bag, and you're also given a XT60 connector, and there's some more standoffs in there as well, and you're given 2 cables as well to power up this ESC board. So let's take a look at this closer. So this is the ESC board, and straight away I can see a bit of an issue with it when using Betaflight, because the way that the motors are set up is backwards to Betaflight. So we have got the top here, and the way that it's laid out for Betaflight is motor 1, motor 2, motor 3, motor 4, and that's a problem because we have the battery connector up the top here. So if you want to have it in that configuration and everything matches up to the arms on your quadcopter, then you're going to have your battery connector coming out of the front. Or at a later point you can go into Betaflight and you can switch around the ESC or motor number, should I say, but that can be a little bit of a pain. So I don't think I'm going to do that when I stick this on my copter. So you can see that there's a little sort of Pico connector here, and that connects directly to the SP Racing F3 Evo flight controller, and this already comes soldered onto it. This is your PWM signal connector, and it's got the ground connected as well, but you will notice there's no power line. So we need to power up the flight controller by soldering another wire from here to the positive and negative on the flight controller, which I believe is these two sides here, I think. Yeah, so it's got V plus there and minus there, so I think that's a bit of an oversight. I think they could have had it powering up off this, and you don't have to solder in another connector. So moving on to the flight controller, and this is the front of the flight controller. You can see that there is some arrows somewhere. There we go, arrows facing upwards, so that's the front of the flight controller. Of course we can switch the orientation around again in Betaflight, because we have got these 2 USB ports here that I'm going to want to access. Now, one of them is for the flight controller and one of them is for multi-wheel on-screen display. Now, I have tried to load up MultiWii on-screen display version 1.6 and nothing gets read, so I'm wondering if I need to go into Arduino and flash it, etc., and that would be a shame. And then it also comes with CleanFlight installed on it as well, so I have installed Betaflight, the latest version already, and the reason I've done that now is the boot pad is underneath here. So once this is in a stack, even if it was actually on the top, that would sit over there and it'd be difficult to get to. Of course you can flash this without having to use the bootloader pad, but if it bricks, then you're going to have to take it all apart. So this last board here actually clips on to this. We have some little standoffs here, I guess you would call them, and then that just sits on there like so and sort of clips into place like that, so you don't have to mess around with any soldering on this one. It's just this one you've got to solder there, and you're also given the sleeve dipole antenna for the receiver. There's a little bind button on there, but you'll notice there's also some dip switches, and that is if you want to bypass the onboard receiver, and then you can have a DSM2 receiver if you like, or you can have a external S-bus or PPM receiver as well, but I'm not sure why you'd want to do that without having a built-in one. I think the idea of having this board is the fact that it's built into it, so I'm going to try and use this. Apparently the range is good for 1 kilometer according to the specifications, so I will have to try that out. So I'm just looking here at how I'm going to put this on the copter. So I'm going to be using the Martian frame, I think, for this one. So that's got to plug into there like that. I got to put all the standoffs on, and I'm just trying to figure out whether I align the board that way, but then of course my camera cable is going to stick out the side as well. So I definitely think there's some design flaws with this one that could be fixed. So this is the machine that I have built just for the RacerCube. So this is the Martian 2 frame. I'm using RacerStar 2205 motors there. And then I'm using for the FPV camera, this is a HS1190. Now I know the HS1190 already has a built-in on-screen display, but this is the first version that was rubbish, so I've gone and turned the on-screen display off on this because it's still a very good camera. And then I used a switcher VTX here. It runs off 5 volts. It's such a good VTX this is. I'll put links in the description to this as well, because I think it's my favorite VTX. Just no noise whatsoever. Runs off 5 volt all the way up to 4S, and I also have this on-way antenna as well. And for the battery I'm using the Turnigy Graphene 1300 mAh 4S, and then we have got a Session 5 mount up the front here with a Session 5, and that is from PRCJ. Now the idea of me building this was to have it lightweight, but it hasn't come out very lightweight. It's 615 grams, which is about the same weight that you would expect for a 5-inch that has just normal ESCs. So I guess that you would only really save weight on a smaller model such as a 130 size quad, something like that. Now, there was a lot of things with this RacerCube that caught me out, so I want to explain them to you. And if you have bought this thing, hopefully that is going to help you. So the first thing that I ran into was, of course, the length of the motor wires. Now, a lot of motors that are being produced now just have short wires because they are to connect to ESCs on the arms. So what I had to do was find some wire here, silicon wire, and I had to lengthen the motor wires here to reach the ESC board. Now, you always think that having one of these all-in-one ESC boards is going to save you time, but if you think about it, I had to do solder joins all here on all of the motors, then use heat shrink over the top of that. So you have to cut them, you have to tin them, and then you also have to cut them to length here as well and solder them. So actually wasn't really any quicker than just using normal ESCs. The way that I have configured this is, I mentioned earlier that the voltage for the ESC board is at the front. So what I have done is I have taken that and I've reversed it around, and I have continued to use the power distribution board on the Martian frame. I probably could have saved some weight not doing that. However, it means that I am now able to use the original XT60 connector on the power distribution board of the Martian frame, and I was able to use a couple of the outputs as well. So I mentioned earlier that the flight controller needs to be powered up. So what I did was I used one of the spare power outlets on the power distribution board of the alien frame to power it up as well. Of course, you can just link up the ESC board to the flight controller, but I found it easier using the power distribution board as part of this. So I have got the board aligned at 90 degrees, and that is so that I can access the USB ports here. And something that caught me out was the connections for the camera and VTX. So as I mentioned, they both output 5 volts, but you are given this cable here, 2 of them, to solder to your camera, your positive, negative and video, and then the same on the VTX as well. So positive, negative and video. However, these come in the same order, but they're not in the same order on the pin. So I was getting the VTX powered up because that does match the right order. Well, then the camera wasn't powering up, but that is because the order is different. That one goes video, positive, negative, and then this one on the other side goes negative, positive, video. So that was the first gotcha that it caught me out with. And then I mentioned earlier as well that this has got multi-wii on-screen display, and it has, and it's on this USB connector here. However, you can't just plug in a USB connector and access multi-wii on-screen display 1.6. You have to plug the battery in, and then it works. So yes, it is already flashed with multi-wii on-screen display, and there was some settings in there that were just completely wrong and I had to change, so I'll go in there and show you that. Another problem that I had was with Betaflight, so I went and flashed the latest version of Betaflight, which is version 3.16, I think, to the date of this video, and it doesn't work with this flight controller. So this took me ages to figure out. I could either have the telemetry working or have the receiver working, and not both at the same time. And when I plugged this into the latest version of Betaflight, I seemed to have 3 UART 1s. And there was some kind of conflict there. It just didn't work at all. So I went back to version 3.01, which I know is a stable version. Problem solved. So some kind of conflict there. Now, the onboard receiver also caught me out as well, because I would expect all this to be set up and ready to go, but I mentioned there's some dip switches on the top of the receiver there, and the dip switches were set for an external receiver. So I managed to bind in D8 mode to my Tyrannus, the receiver, but I wasn't getting any signal through, and it was literally just because those dip switches were in the external position. So you need to have them on the internal position, and you also need to have them in the S-bus configuration as well. And then that worked, so a lot of things to catch me out there. So you are given a load of standoffs in this kit. However, to fit it on the Martian frame, I've had to improvise a little bit. Another thing that they want you to do as well is just have this top board tension fitted. So the idea is that your screws here just screw in at the bottom there. There's no room for any standoffs there because we've got these USB connectors, so standoffs won't fit on here. So what I did was I got some extra long screws and then screwed in to the standoffs here because I wasn't happy with that just being tension fitted. I wanted a little bit more security with that as well. So here I am in the Betaflight configurator. You download this from the Chrome App Store. As I mentioned, I've already flashed version 3.01 to this board. I tried to update it to the latest version, but there was some kind of confliction with the UARTs. It gave me 3 UART ones, and I couldn't get the telemetry working and the receiver at the same time, so I downgraded to this version, which I know is a stable release, and everything's working fine. So I've got the quadcopter plugged in to the computer via its USB cable, and then I've also got the battery plugged in. That is so I can power up the receiver and also show you the on-screen display, because you need the battery plugged in for that as well. And I've also got the transmitter turned on. So it says COM11 at the top there. Let's connect to it. I've got expert mode enabled up here. Let's first of all go into the ports. So we have a VCP port here, which is turned on when you flash Betaflight. However, it did turn off UART1, so I've had to turn that back on for the telemetry. And then for the onboard receiver, I've got serial RX selected here on the UART2. So let's go into the configuration. You can see that I've got the board alignment at 90 degrees, so I can have my USB port coming out of the side. And then I've got quad X set up here, one shot 125 for the ESC motor protocol, and then I've got motor stop turned off, and then disarm the motors regardless of the throttle value when arming via an aux channel, because I am going to be arming via an aux channel. And then you can see the minimum throttle is actually set quite low, but it works fine at 1020. I did that when I calibrated the ESCs, and the maximum throttle 2000 for my Tyrannus. So if we just scroll down here, I've got the VBAT enabled. You can see that the battery telemetry is coming through at the top there. Now I have reduced the warning cell voltage to 3.4 volts. It's 3.5 as standard, but I just like it a little bit lower to give me a little bit more time before the beeper starts going off. And then the minimum cell voltage I've reduced to 3.1. So if we scroll down here further, I have got serial-based receiver set up here for the onboard receiver, and then S-bus here as well. So that's what you need to have set up. And then also got the RSSI enabled here as well. I'll show you how I set that up. Current meter is enabled, however there's no current meter on this model, so that's not doing anything. So coming down here, I've got telemetry enabled, black box, and transponder. So let's go into the failsafe there, and it's set to drop, which is fine. That's the stock Betaflight settings, and of course you want to test that before putting the props on. I don't have the props on here at the moment because I've got the battery plugged in. So into the PIDs, I've got these stock PIDs here with just the D bumped up to 3.7. I find that a good starting point when tuning. Then I've got the Super 8 bumped up to 0.8 as well, and then everything else here is standard. Then in the receiver, what you will see is TAER for the channel map. You can see everything is working here, and then we've got the RSSI channel on aux 5, which is channel 9. So over here, if you want to move the RSSI to your on-screen display, then you want to select channel 9 in this configuration. Then that's going to send it to the on-screen display, and then everything else here is standard. So let's go into the modes here. So I've got it arming on a 2-position switch on the aux 2, then I've got angle mode, horizon, and acro on a 3-position switch, and actually I need to add a beeper as well. So if we just add that in there, I've got it on the aux 3, I think. So there you go, you can see that move across there. So if I now press save, the beeper goes off for a lost model alarm there. Now, I did find that I needed to calibrate the ESCs, so the way that you do that is unplug your battery, tick this here, put the master to the top there, plug your battery in, you'll get the magic tones, drop the master down, and then that will calibrate your ESCs. I did need to do that because they were all over the place. So the last thing that I'm going to show you here is the CLI, just to show you the version. As I say, I was having problems with the ports. There's loads of UART1s showing up, which is no good. So the next thing I'm going to do is disconnect here. And then I'm going to go into BL Suite because I did have to make some changes there. So if I select the right COM port and then I've got the Clean Flight pass through there, I'm going to connect to it and then press check. So sadly, this is just BL not BL S, and if I press OK there. So I soldered all of the motors direct to the ESC pads, and every single one of them had to be reversed. Can you see there? So I'm selected on all of them. All of them needed to be reversed. So I did that, and that's about it in there, I think. I don't think I changed anything else. I put braking on, actually, there, but yeah, it's a shame there's no BL S with this setup. That would definitely be an improvement. So I'm going to disconnect from this. Okay, so next I have taken the USB cable and moved it along into the other USB port so we can take a look at the on-screen display. Now I must stress, you have to have the battery plugged in so that you can read from the on-screen display, so make sure you have the props off as well. So I'm just going to minimize BL Suite here, and then let's go into multi-UI on-screen display. It's version 1.6 that this has come with, and you can see there that it says COM10, so I'm going to click on there and it says waiting for on-screen display. Now I have already changed all of the settings on here because it was just set up completely random. Everything was enabled, and of course we don't have GPS and things like that, so I'll just show you what I enabled here. So the display voltage, of course, however, it wasn't set to use FC voltage, so I have had to enable that. So it was just given some random figure here for the voltage. It was set up for 4S, and the voltage adjust was all fine there, and the voltage alarm was set up like that as well. So we don't have any current sensor, so all of the current stuff is turned off. Now here the RSSI was turned off, however we can utilize it. So I've got display RSSI, that's this value here, and I've got use FC RSSI, and that seems to work fine. And then everything else here is turned off, other than I've got it set to NTSC for my camera, and I've got display the flight mode, so that's up here. I've got the timer, which is here, and then everything else is turned off. So you change these settings and then press right and you're good to go, but this was just absolutely all incorrect. So if you want to copy my settings, you're absolutely welcome. Okay, let's go for a line of sight with the RacerCube. So this is actually the Maiden, so I'm keeping it in angle mode, and let's arm it, see what happens. It flies! Make sure all the controls are okay. Feels very floaty. The punch is insane as any other 5-inch. I notice when I do those punches, sometimes the camera shakes, and that is because in order to follow this thing, I have to lift my head really quickly, and it sometimes causes the camera to jerk. Oh, I think everything's alright with this one. Famous last words. Seems fairly snappy though. Hovering at a very low throttle just because we have all that power. Really like how this one's come out. Nice neat build. Nice neat build and insane power. Looking forward to flying at FPV. Some people say to me, how do you fly line of sight acro? And for me, I make sure that I don't do my maneuvers too quickly, because if you do them too quickly then you can easily get disorientated. But if you want to do a slow roll, then you can see where it is in the maneuver and fly a little bit easier. That's just me. I'm still fairly new to the line of sight acro, but it's always been my opinion that you should learn to fly line of sight before FPV. This thing's flying nice, so I think I'm going to bring it in and try some FPV with it. So I made a colossal mistake on the FPV Maiden. Just have a look at that RSSI value. Flashing already down to 46, now down to 30, and I get a failsafe upside down and smash. I have some broken props, mud everywhere, and the camera has ejected. So I either have received another dud, because I've been having so much bad luck with products lately. It's really demotivating actually, or the range just isn't very good on this. So what I decided to do was go for another flight and just keep it in close, and you can see there that the RSSI very low, should be hovering at around about 70 or 80, at least up to 120 meters, and you can see that I'm really close to myself, and it's flashing and we're getting really low RSSI readings. So I think what I am going to take away from this is that it's probably best not to use the onboard receiver. Please let me know if you've got one of these and you're having no problems whatsoever with the onboard receiver. But I feel lucky that I can change those dip switches and then put just a normal X4RSB on there. You can see there as well, I noticed, I don't know if it's a brownout, but I noticed when I did full throttle and went to do a roll, at the top of the roll, that is where it would fail safe, which is really unfortunate, because that is the time when you don't want to fail safe, is when it's upside down, and because it pauses for a second, it just sort of keeps rolling for a little bit, and it absolutely got caked in mud. There's just mud all in the motors. I had to take all of the motors apart and get rid of the mud, and yeah, so I was not happy about that, but there you go. I'm gonna stick another receiver on this and see how it performs. I might also just buy a spare top board in case I was having some issues as I go into the trees there. But I think, apart from the issues that I've had, I think it's a good idea, and I do think this is the future. Maybe even, you know, not even having a stack, just having one board, I think is probably the future. And I'm just trying to do some flips and rolls here, and you can see it's just fail-safing, and luckily it landed flat there, and I'm sort of just thinking to myself, what on earth happened there? Are we still okay? But I armed it again and it continued to fly. I do like the on-screen display, it's nice and clear. I like the ESCs, I think the flight control is nice. By the way, the tune is a little bit out, the D is a little bit too high. I need to reduce it definitely, because I'm getting a little bit of a flutter on there, but the motors weren't getting hot or anything like that. It's really cold outside anyway, so not a huge problem. But yeah, a bit deflated after spending probably a day trying to figure out all the stuff. because there we go, it's fail-safing again, really close. Yeah, it took me ages to figure out how to get the receiver all working and all the different configurations, and then to fly it and have fail-safe. I was disappointed. But anyway, I'll put a link in the description if you wish to get one. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.